Welcome back to the table, friends. I'm your humble host, GreyDMs, and with me as always is my co-host and co-conspirator, Owen.
Hi.
You are listening to Tabletop by Night, a weekly podcast where we continue our exploration of Vampire the Masquerade. Tonight we gather around the table to answer the question, how does the night change you? So,
Well, I'm usually sleeping, so
we have a couple guests with us today. We have returning guest Max, and we have Jason with us.
Hello.
So tonight we gather to discuss two of the characters that we've been playing for a while. We've maybe referenced them before in the podcast.
So we have.
I'm sure all the times that we've basically maybe someday we'll talk about them. Well, today we're going to talk about them a little bit, and we're going to use them as a basis for answering some of the questions that detail how do you take a character long form, possibly across multiple campaigns, and keep that character living and evolving. So today, chiefly, Owen is going to be discussing a character along with Jason. So I'm going to have some questions to guide us through this discussion. But maybe, Owen, you can start by telling us a little bit about who is Keith.
So Keith Anderson is a Toreador. No. Wow, why did I say Toreador? Sorry, he's a Tremere.
Yeah,
no. Toreador. Fuck Toreadors. No, sorry, he's a Tremere. That, well, let me go into my thought process when I made him. I wanted to make someone that was older. A lot of the times when we make characters, we tend to make younger characters, spry, strong, whatever. While in Vampire, you have that option that you can make an old man who's still scary, strong, and, powerful. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to make him important in the city. We were playing in New York, so he was going to be the CEO of a company that we had made up. And all that's well and good, but I wanted the issue he had that all of that was going to be taken away from him. And that was his crux. He grew up as this, high power, fast paced CEO, and he had a terminal disease. And this terminal disease was going to kill him. And he did everything he could to try to get out of it, get around it, whatever, and nothing worked. And he was eventually given a choice by someone that said that they could, fix his problem, but he had some strings attached that he would have to follow. And that was basically the basis of Keith.
Yeah, that was I kind of remember that the pitch that you gave me was what happens if this person who is very, very wealthy and powerful kind of basically just chooses not to die.
Yes.
And this is the route that they choose.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's really cool. And that's kind of like that's how I started becoming a fan of the character.
Yeah. It was like someone who had it all suddenly faces their mortality like everyone else has to. Someone of privilege finally finds out, it's not, I don't get my way just because I have money. But then he does. Yeah,
but as we go on, we'll talk about how that needed to be a fall.
Yes,
that's really good. But in contrast to Keith,
in complete contrast,
we had Jason, the same game. So why don't you talk about a little bit of that character development?
Yeah, Jason was the ultimate loner. He was late teens, early 20s, didn't have a family, didn't really have a home. Was working late teens, early 20s jobs to try to stay afloat. And then one day he woke up as a vampire. He didn't know where it came from or why it happened. And then lo and behold, he was born a caitiff and didn't belong to anybody in the vampire world either.
He didn't just wake up a vampire. He woke up in a dumpster.
Yeah, he did wake up in a dumpster. Yeah. Kind of fitting for Jason. Yeah, he found a worm under Keith's arm.
Wing.
Yeah.
We're not trying to make this weird or anything.
And that's, how his character kind of developed. He was tired of not fitting in. He was tired of being a loner. He wanted to fit in somewhere, be part of something bigger than him. He went about it all the wrong way. and cause some mass destruction.
If only he had listened to Keith.
If only. And then turned kind of rebel and, went that route, looking to belong to something, which he did for a little while, and then burned that bridge too. And then ultimately, if he would have just stayed his course for a little while, he would have became what he wanted to become all along.
Found what he was missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But instead, he lit it on fire and did gas on it and had to run away.
Did. Make sure we focus on the right parts here. Yeah, like I said, I think you're the thing that caught me, because I think that game specifically, I was asking you guys to come up with a theme first, and the thing was, you really was like, what about the guy who basically has never managed to have a family? Like, every time he finds a family, it's taken away from him, and he thinks he doesn't deserve it, and all that stuff.
And that became a theme.
That was 100%, and was really interesting to develop. What about you, Max? Do you have a character you want to talk? It doesn't have to be from that same game. It can be from whatever.
Oh,
if you want to.
I'm going to go to the character model.
The original Max.
It's probably the most fun to talk about. Yeah. It definitely had the most history.
Oh, yeah.
Any character I made. So,
trying to think back to
all those years ago.
Yeah, I know. I was just trying to think about what was the your idea for making that character.
Well, it was my first character on any role playing game, because I never. It was somebody asked me, "Hey, come on, just please try this out one time," and so I went into it with no idea of what I was going to make. I didn't put any thought into it. So when it came time, I'm like, okay, what's the concept of your character? I'm like, well, he has amnesia. That was easiest out of anything. It was,
I don't know.
I don't know. He's got amnesia. Perfect. But, he woke up and he's got these runes carved into him. And, so there's some mystery. Why did he get embraced? And, what are those? What do they do? That kind of thing. And it just kind of
snowballed.
Yeah. So me learning to play the game was also like the evolution of this character into just all the bad things a vampire can become. You know? And then realizing too, like, oh, this is getting pretty serious. I need to reel it back,
But it was too late.
It was way too late. So.
And the various boogeymen based on him in quite a few of our stories.
Yeah. But the next character I made was the traditional, a lot of thought went into it kind of thing.
That's true.
That was a werewolf.
Yeah.
Kind of give you the chance to flesh out your whole, clan group, too.
And then the third go around was Hauser.
And then you just wanted to
see if I could creep everybody.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just discuss.
It was because I was like, hey, body horror. I wonder if I can make everybody cringe.
Zamisi.
You succeeded.
Okay, so first question basically has already been answered essentially. But
what about you, Grey?
What about me?
Yes.
What about me?
Yes.
I haven't had to. Let's see. Okay. The characters I've ever made for Vampire.
Yeah.
The first one we all know about, which was me thinking optimistically, I'm going to make a fun character. And I'm going to these Venturers, they're swell guys. And Dominate's a cool ability. I like a high humanity score. And wait, that'll not ever work. And I think my second vampire character was, I want to go do that idea and burn down. I'm actually going to go back and be what that character should have been, which is just middle of the road humanity. Yeah, we've made so many D&D characters, but I haven't really made that many playable vampire characters. I honestly don't know what I would make.
I mean, I always thought because he showed up in some of our other games, but you're cleaner.
Yeah, like I said, that was kind of Janos was supposed to be basically what Drake should have been.
Yeah.
In all the ways he should have been. And it was a fun character to make. Like I said, that was pretty much the only character that had that kind of thing where I knew the game and I was I had the time to prepare and have fun.
See, but that wasn't your next character.
It wasn't?
No. Your next character was the same campaign that he created.
I don't even think of that as a character. That was a weapon against the storyteller. I was like, I have mathematically conquered combat. It was, yeah.
Then you had to force him to bullshit his way through.
But that was the character. Like, I made this character to fight and compete. And it's just like, well, I mean, they were known as philosophers and, men of the people.
Yeah, but I didn't put any points into that.
So I can't do any of that.
Well, I want to rally the people. Okay, what do you say? Long soliloquy that Grey gives out. Roll it. Oh, come on!
When Grey was in character creation in whatever alternate world we made ourselves in, he chose the feat, I must learn through failure. Okay? Just saying, okay?
That's
okay.
Another good topic is
I mean,
did you have any characters that you considered failures?
A lot.
But were fun.
No, like Kaylin was a mage. That was like my honest to good, like that was like the response from Grey. And that was not like, I was like, all right, gotcha, course correction. Like I had faith in the storyteller. I was like, I'm going to do something fun here. I want to do a character that I really care about. And yeah, looking back, he was a mall ninja.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the whole,
Yeah, I know.
a mage mall ninja, but he was also like, he was basically a Jedi.
Yeah.
I literally modeled him after like the one character in all media I would want to play more than anything, which is like Obi-Wan freaking Kenobi, So like Kaylin got to be that fun thing, and we did have a decent fun time playing him, even though sometimes it got a little weird, but not as bad as later on, but I hadn't learned like there is this kind of, maybe there's a misunderstanding for some people. And I think a lot of storytellers and DMs kind of keep this, that if you DM forever and you storytell forever, you definitely have the idea of all these characters in your head. That does not mean I know, yes. But that does not mean we have any experience making characters.
Right.
Like making an NPC and making a playable character are two different skill sets. And that's why like a DM comes to the table and they're like, I have a finely crafted mechanical character with a whole bunch of backstory and stuff. And then they're like, I don't know how to play it. Because they're
do with my hands.
Yeah, it kind of, but they're in like DM mode, which is like in and out of characters' heads really quickly. They're not in, I've spent a year and a half playing one character and how would they respond to this thing, So like there's a certain element. I just, with Vampire, aside from Janos, and Janos was like, I wanted to fix all the problems of providing too many knives, providing a hindrance to what I could do in the game, being a supportive character, because I pitched him to you as like, I'm going to kind of support everybody else.
Right, because everybody else that was playing for the most part was pretty new too.
It's like he's a cleaner. He's just going to fix people's problems. Yeah. He's not going to be the guy. And then he did have a lot of fun because one of the other characters decided to betray us, and
obviously betray us.
So like he was fun, but I think he was a stepping stone on the road to something else. So that's a good question. I just don't think I have a lot of input in this area specifically. So
it's fine though, because I mean you're giving the viewpoint of the forever DM.
Yeah. So okay. So here's a question. How did you choose the clan that your character was, and what influence did that have your character's story? You got a good one because of what you chose, but what about Keith? Let's start like there.
Honestly, there were two really big deciding factors in it. I wanted dominate, but I didn't want to play adventure.
Yeah.
And sorry, just giving you a moment.
I know.
I just wanted to do something a little bit different because I think, had anybody in any of our games played Tremere up to that point?
No, because it was Masquerade, and we didn't play it in the Dark Ages.
Okay, yeah. So really, it was just something no one had really done before, so I wanted to give it a try. I like the idea behind blood sorcery. I wanted to toy with that a lot. We didn't get into it as much as I wanted to, but that's okay because I wasn't exactly throwing points at it either. But yeah, the big thing was I wanted to be an established clan. I wanted dominate was a necessity for the character that I wanted to create. And I didn't want the scumminess that I feel comes from Ventru. So that was what really kind of led me that direction. And it worked because once we fleshed things out a little bit, we looked at, the way the pyramid works and, all of that. I was just like, actually, this is really badass. I like this. I want to do this. And I really like it. And the possibilities of what can happen because he's a Tremere is just really cool.
Yeah. There are some times when you make a choice and you don't realize it, but you make a choice that's really fortuitous. And like a lot of things with that character ended up being that way. What about Jason?
Jason's choice was pretty easy. He was a loner, so he picked the loner clan. It was fitting for him because he always felt like he didn't belong. And then he takes the clan that doesn't belong.
Yeah.
The Caitiff.
Yeah. Like, I remember like doing the pitch to everybody and you coming back Caitiff, and I was like, why would you do that to yourself? And then I was like, if there's anybody at the table who is going to play that well, I'm like, it's you, because you're the character who's like, no, I'm playing this character no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, all right, this is the guy to do it,
The die has been cast.
Yeah.
This is the character I'm creating. Where's my brother?
And then like, as you kept going and you kept talking about like what you had thought of, I was like, oh yeah, no, you turned it into like, this is his identity. This is very interesting and pretty cool.
Yeah. When you sit down at the table, it's the character comes out. And the character's out until you step away from the table.
You really are the embodiment of the person that plays their character, no matter what that character is. I cannot do that.
Yeah.
Like I've seen you struggle with characters, but only because you're like, I'm just not quite there in their head yet to know what they're going to do. And there's like, I fucking hate this character. I hate this character. Why did I make this character? I don't want to play this character. And several times Grey has seen me do that, and he's just like, yep, screwed up again.
Yeah. Like,
God damn it.
But no, yeah, like
Owen screwed up again.
Yep.
But no, like we both have that. Like you do it, you're drawn to it, which is weird because like you like the idea that you concocted like more than you're like, oh,
even if I can't play it.
Yeah. But like I do the same thing. Like I almost, and I have to think of like, D&D instead, but like I almost have to basically make every single one of my characters have like intelligence, 10 or higher.
Yeah.
Just so that I don't have to put a handicap, because like playing the game for so long and stuff, like I don't want to see something and then be like, I cannot interact with this. That's the most frustrating thing. Even though some of the characters that are the most fun to play are characters that are stupid, but like when you step to the table that day, and if you're not like in the mode, then you're starting to do things your character would never do, and you're like,
it's like over the years that we've played, it's kind of become a tradition that I'm either the information guy, I'm playing the information guy, or I'm playing the guy that's kind of like pointing us in a direction. And anytime I don't play that person, I play the opposite of that. You can see me get frustrated when I see the people at the table not putting things together. And I'm just like, I so want to say something, but I can't, because why would my character say that? And I just freak.
I think that's why Vampire is harder for me to play than D&D, because with D&D, everything's a dice roll.
Yeah.
And with my character, it's going to be a dice roll. It's with D&D. But with Vampire, you really have to get into the mind of the character and make decisions without a dice roll. And, what's in his head, what's his motive. Sometimes that's really fun to do, and sometimes that's really freaking hard to do because, I can get in the way. It's become easier over the years that we do this, but there's still times where it's like, I know what I want to do, but I don't think my character would do that.
Yeah, it's like separating the meta from like, what would this guy that knows nothing, what should he do? What would he be prone to do?
Yeah. And the other thing about it too is like, it's very hard to do that if the party isn't balanced. Not not balanced mechanically in the game terms, but balanced in the players that come to the table.
Yeah.
Because like each player serves kind of a purpose generally if you have a well-defined group. Like specifically because two of the players are here right now. When we all played together, like the balance between Owen and Max, like there was something very helpful for that, because like Max, you had the drive to discover like openly, because like when you were fixated on something, you weren't like, I have to hide this information. That would come second. And like Owen doesn't do that. Owen does, I want to know everything, you know? So if he's reactionary, he's like in a better position to do what he wants, because he can like decide whether, oh, I'm not going to say that I saw that and all that stuff.
Oh, they're not quite going in the direction I want them to go, so I'm going to give this a little bit of information out. So.
Exactly. But when you take away the person driving the party towards something, and like Owen has to step up and also drive the party, like you see people just stop. It falls apart. And you end up with a situation of like, I can only describe it as like the like, I don't want to say peons, but like the young people.
All the cards have fallen into place for me. How did that ever happen?
No, it's more of like this is such a bad analogy. I'm trying to figure out a way to pull back this analogy, but it's like the I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good way to clean it up and not be bad.
Just say it.
But it's okay. I'm just go like in a better way. It's like the bear basically going like, "Hey kids, come out in the woods with me," and all the little kids are like, "Sure." And the bear's like, "I feel like rather than eating you, I should impress upon you why you shouldn't have followed me out in the woods in the first place." Like that kind of situation keeps happening where it's just like, don't.
Or you eat one, and you're like, okay, kids.
What did we learn? Yeah, so we have had several situations like that where Grey and I have looked at each other across the table. Grey knows exactly what I'm thinking, looks at the other players, and it's just like, are you guys seeing this? Are you guys watching?
Anybody?
Do you understand? And then they just follow the little path I've laid out before them. And he's just like, I don't understand why this keeps happening.
So, but that is
the main reason is because two of the people we play with the most right now, I haven't stabbed them in the back yet. If you really think about it.
That's really good that I have that on record.
I don't mean yet as in I'm going to. I just mean like in a game I haven't done that.
That was a heavy yet.
It sure sounded like you could have just replaced that with, well, I haven't. Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to cut that part out. Sorry.
Roll that part.
I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but you know,
it's gonna happen. Okay, from my mouth to your ears, it's gonna happen. But
no,
it doesn't happen in every game.
Yeah, that is interesting because it like generations of our table, so to speak. Like one generation was like the generation that heard about the previous one, where like the biggest example that happening. And I guess it was such a fresh example that they were the generation that sucked because you were like, why are you guys always looking to me for this? But now that we're so many years later on, like, and I tried very hard not to like impress those stories heavily on them at first. You're kind of surprised that like, you know, just there's this thing. And like, to your credit, you do play characters now that are not, that they're not inclined to be malicious. Like,
no, I've played one malicious character.
It just had that reputation was extensive.
Yeah. And like other characters that I've played have had not malicious intent, but a greedy attitude towards something. And that caused conflict, but it wasn't the focus of the character. Like, one of them just knew what was coming, so he prepared. And that looked malicious to everyone around, but he's like, no, you guys aren't paying attention. He started it. I finished it.
It's true. It is true. Yes. Hey, okay. Let's back on making any of this.
Sorry. This is such a off topic.
Okay. So
I just want to say, like, in our current game, I have had a lot of fun watching Jason be that role of kind of pointing us where to go and what to do. Like it's been fun.
And that is not a role that's Jason.
I think that's like the best part of it, right? Because he's like, I want to get away from you guys. I don't want to be any part of it.
Well, he's so taken out of his element. I mean, what he came from in New York to what he's confronted with in Florida, and he's like, this is just what I wanted to get away from. And now it's being forced right down my throat.
It's gotta be creator. He's like, oh, I've traveled halfway across the U.S. to get away from all these politics. And the Tremere just like, hey, come right on in. And he's like, oh, this doesn't bode well for me.
Wait, Keith said what? Oh, no.
Yeah.
Why did you guys buy me a house? I don't even, I have to pay this back. I don't even know what's going on here.
Plus, who did that Escalade belong to?
I have no idea.
That's crazy. Okay, so this is a pretty good question here.
Yeah.
Can you share a time when an unexpected in-game event significantly altered your character's development arc?
Oh, yeah. Big time. And I can thank you for that. So, Keith, being who he was, the 80s guy, kind of, tech, whatever, entrepreneur, once we kind of fleshed out where he was in the whole scheme of, politics in New York, and I kind of had an idea of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do, this young woman shows up at his doorstep claiming to be his daughter, who he knows he doesn't have a daughter, but through magic, mage, alternate realities, all this other stuff, turns out he's got this daughter. I did not see that coming. I was originally, first impressions, kind of pissed off because I was like, why would Grey do this? Like, this isn't something I want to do. This isn't something I want to deal with.
What a twist.
Yeah. And then I sat back and I thought, I was just like, no, the reasoning behind it makes sense. The story he created for it makes sense. This is a great twist to throw at this character that thought he only had to worry about himself and what he wanted. And all of a sudden he has this person who's basically maybe not dependent on him to survive, but maybe dependent on him for her sense of purpose.
Yeah. And definitely in the beginning, she was like, I have more power than I know how to do things with. So he needed to be like, you should be thinking about this.
Yeah.
And you should be hiding. And
yeah, definitely. He was like, you need to not, the circles I roam in, you are very dangerous if you get found out, but at the same time, he's like, I can't abandon you. Yeah. And like, after that, I was like, fuck, this just became like a huge touchstone for him. Like he has to have this. He has to protect it. And then later getting that whole thing like thrown in his face where he has to decide, I can make her happy or I can make sure she's safe.
Oh yeah.
And he decided to make sure she's safe, and that made her hate him.
It was so yeah. So to back up a little bit to explain, like Owen said, Keith's story as presented to me, because we were trying to be collaborative on these things, was this concept that he was basically fighting against mortality, and like his kind of ego and stuff was just like, no, like I'm not going down this way, right. And this is what led him to his choices. So one of the things you had said and we had talked about is one of your touchstones had been a secretary character, and we had kind of both talked that like, yeah, there probably was some romantic thing back and forth because she was like this.
She was his support basically when all of this was going down, the only person he could really trust.
Yeah. And the way you designed kind of Keith and some of the stuff that you had touched on, she was like very much from that world of like that perfect 50s or 60s secretary, the strong woman behind him that was taking care of stuff. Then we had talked about she had taken over his mortal legacy.
Right.
And so him working it back. So then it got into this whole thing of like, if Keith's real struggle had always been this concept of like not going after the life that he could have had and focusing on power and focusing on prestige and growth.
Instead of going after the money, he went after his own happiness.
Yeah. What if a literal relic of the other choice showed up in his life? And I was like, man, this is 50-50, right? Like as a player, I was like, he's either going to take this or he's going to hate it. And like you said, you hated it initially. And then that started to change. Yeah. And I was like, oh, we're deep into it. And the story got better. And now we're so.
It's funny because, like you said, I hated it to begin with. And I can't say I hated the idea. I hated that you did this to me. That's what I hated. Because I was just like, I realize this is really good and this is awesome that you did this. And I'm so pissed off that I have to deal with it now because it's really good and I'm not sure I can pull this off, you know?
So you can have those moments, like the character can have those moments, but you can have one as a player. Because that happened to me, that first campaign we ever played where I was playing as Max, because I was a gangrel, and through a large part of the story, I just reveled in the whole, like, I'm going to just tear people apart. So I was losing humanity. And it got to the point where, like, in that version of Vampire, it was the lower you get in humanity, the more you can justify doing murder, or creepy things. So there were, like, 2 instances, they might have been even in the same session, where the one where it was like the character had to stop and realize, oh, hey, what the fuck? What have I done? And it was just our DM said, okay, you guys wake up, now you got to feed. So how do you feed? It was just beginning of sessions exploring that. And I was like, well, I'm a gangrel. I sleep in the earth, and I wake up at night, I turn into a wolf and I go find somebody. And he's like, okay, you find a little kid. I'm like, okay, well, he's homeless. So I pretended to be this, good dog, this good boy. And he leads me back to his parents, who then I eat in front of him. And that was like, okay, well, now you got to roll humanity because that is fucked up. And that roll I lost. And they're like, okay, you drop one. Now you're like scraping a barrel. Like you're running into problems where like you're having nightmares every night, like all this kind of shit. But as a player, it was when I don't remember if it was the same session or not, but we had to help somebody like do a ritual. He's like, we need a skull. Max, can you go get a skull? Like, sure. So I literally killed a bouncer outside of a bar, flayed the flesh off his head, and just brought like, here's your skull. And basically the guy who's doing the ritual grabbed the skull like, ugh. What the fuck? Why is this all bloody? Where the fuck did you get this? I'm like, well, you said you needed a skull, right? So I killed somebody, ripped the flesh off, and they're like, okay, guess what? You got to roll humanity again. I'm like, I think this has gotten away from me.
I think I do not understand. What about Jason? Because I can think of one with him, but I think of a few.
Yeah, I think the biggest one was also Grey's fault. It was when Jason thought he finally found something with the Thin Bloods. And, he knew that he was going to get the prince, and he finally found a team that he was going to build together. He was a fledgling vampire. He didn't know what was going to happen with Thin Bloods and real vampires, and then to see them slaughtered before his eyes, and then he himself, with everybody watching, had a decision to make. Do I take out this Thin Blood and
who's looking to you for help?
Yeah, I mean, it's so to frame for the audience, it's that classic moment where, he basically was like, oh, hey, I'm going to convince these people to like go riot and go essentially, unfortunately, you told them where Elysium was and they were just like, oh, that's where all the old people hang out. We're going to go attack it. And then like the story circumstances caused you to be at Elysium when it's being attacked. And so like you watched the sheriff and the hounds go out and start dealing with
easily dealing with it.
And then one of the poor Thin Bloods that was trying to get away because they realized that what was happening to them, like then sought you for like, hey, could you help me? And you were like, oh man, I just was talking to the sheriff. Like there's no way.
The sheriff's right there.
Yeah, it was do or die. Here I am by myself and one Thin Blood against everybody. And the Thin Blood had to go. And it
was such a dark choice, dude. It was so good.
It was definitely a character change because he had, he had gone through his whole life not belonging and looking. And when he finally thought he had something, it came down to such a hard decision. When not only was he losing everything, he had to commit to act, like the final straw of losing the possibility of belonging to something. And yeah,
oh no, the consequences of my actions.
And that's what it turned out to be. And, then from there, he just went off the deep end and
ended up in Florida.
There's a long period where he's just like, Keith, tell me what to do. Like, I'm really hurting.
He's, started running with the wrong crowd.
Yeah.
That
was good. Okay.
Such a disappointment.
I gave him a place to live. I gave him clothes.
Just spit in my face.
Gave him a Toyota Corolla.
Hey, that got him all the way to Florida.
I know. It's a dependable car. He's looking after you.
So let's see. How do you balance maintaining character consistency with also allowing for growth and change?
I don't.
Listen, you don't have to have an answer because some of these are like a little.
That kind of starts with how like your character creation, because it's like if you go overboard with the meticulously crafted backstory, you're not leaving any room for growth. It's like at some point you gotta like hand the reins over to the DM of like, okay, I don't want to know what's gonna happen next. So
I do think that like one of the kind of like you said, one of the pitfalls is you can write yourself out of the story.
Yeah.
Because like if you create a character that does not mesh with the story that the group is telling, and like you spend a lot of time buying into that and like creating this character, you can pigeonhole yourself and like, I don't have a reason anymore for this character to be here. And like I did that once, and like I definitely understand that. Like that's kind of like this pitfall where like you just didn't understand the way things were going to go. So you got to be careful with that. But yeah, did you have any other ideas?
For me, I don't look at long-term character development.
Mm-hmm.
Every game is character development. Every decision is character development.
Yeah, you can't really map out where exactly you're going to go because that just runs into the same thing. Like if you're just literally there to tell your story, what's the point of playing? It's not a single player game.
The interesting thing about Miami right now for me is that we went through kind of like the introduction where Jason was teaching the fledglings, and like they're still in a learning mode, which is okay, but there's going to be this other story point where, and not like planned out, but there's inevitably going to be another story point where they're going to start getting political, and they're going to have to think to themselves, should I consult Jason about how this could go? That's what I'm very interested in, because that's a different opinion he's going to have, right? Instead of like, this is what you need to know to survive, he's going to be like, whatever, I don't know, his opinions are going to be like,
I can tell you what not to do.
yeah, like
I'm trying to burn down Elysium. Don't do that.
Yeah, there's like, it's that like the difference between having a conversation with a kid and then having a conversation with a late teen, because now you're like closer to adulthood. So you're like, okay, I'm going to give you more complex advice. And then at that point, Jason has to kind of think back on, like his like himself and what he's doing and be like, it's going to be very interesting if the players start questioning on you and be like, what do you think we should do? And he's like, I don't want I don't want any part of this.
Oh, I'm going to be asking a lot.
And that's
Dale knows where you live.
Yeah, and that is not playing into his wheelhouse. He's
like, don't put that on me.
He made the decision that totally messed up the rest of his non-human life.
He definitely closed a whole book that he never knew was open.
Yeah. And it was everything that he wanted. So now he's second guessing everything. And now to have people or vampires coming to him for advice, like he really going to want to lead somebody down the wrong path. It should be interesting.
Mm.
Well, at least he's got experience leading people down the wrong path.
He might end up meeting a gangrel mommy he likes.
Step on me, muscle mommy.
With the amount of characters, with the very strong personality characters we put in this game, that'd be interesting. How do you handle character conflicts within the group? And do you have any tips for resolving them in game?
I usually point at someone else and say they did it and let them figure it out.
I say it's what my character would do. It's
yeah.
I can't help it.
And when that doesn't even exist, I've seen you roll dice
Yeah,
to figure out what your character would do as well.
100%. It's character. It's not me.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. Just don't pop a squat.
Attack a guy that's just minding his own business.
Yeah.
I attacked the player.
Angry. I'm angry at that player, so I'm going to screw everybody.
Yeah, resolving conflict. That I don't know if that's anybody's strong suit here.
No, it's really not. I know how to make it worse.
Yes, I was saying, because I was thinking, I was just like, okay, 3 of us have basically led to the demise of another character in varying elaborate ways. Like, definitely you have been scapegoated the most,
Yep.
or just sought after the most.
Yep.
That one's been pretty interesting. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if
Like, I can really only think of one situation where someone got mad.
yeah,
and
it
that
is
was-
the situation.
Yeah, the situation.
The big situation. Aside from stuff like it was either between DM and character or something
Yeah.
like that, and definitely points at which we like just got emotional. There were times when like we picked on a character too much or something.
Whatever.
Sometimes
do you
on
mean?
purpose. Oh, sometimes the whole group picked on a character, but sometimes the DM wants to make a player cry.
Yep, seen that.
Yep. Not proud. Let's see. What else we got here? Oh, okay. So have you ever had to retire a character, and how did you decide it was time? Because this is both the question and the concept is something eventually both of you will face with the characters you're kind of playing, right? Like, because you have these, the more you care about a character, especially with Vampire, because Vampire doesn't necessarily have an end to a character.
No. I don't know. I mean, there's characters that we've just not gone back to because we stopped playing a game.
True.
The only one I can think of that I've honestly retired is a character that still kind of exists in the, outside memory of the Vampire games that we play. That would be Hashtep, because I don't, as much as I loved that character, I don't plan to ever play him again. He just became, we've kind of worked him into the myths of Vampire in our own games to the point where it's just like, yeah, he can never be played.
Became a boogie.
He has to be dead.
Yeah.
But the things that he's done still happen.
Yeah, and I think that maybe there's a little bit of an answer there, is where if your character ends up becoming more important as something other than a character, like a legacy or an idea, and if you opening that up would tend to feel less for some reason, then that might be one good reason. It's like, did you have another?
Oh, I think it's like what Owen said. We've had characters that we just never went back to. But as far as Jason goes, I don't look that far ahead. That'll be interesting to see, what the end looks like for him. Does he finally get, something to belong to? Does he finally, cross the wrong line too far? Does he? Oh, I'm excited to see where that ends up.
It's like, as far as Keith is concerned, he's a character I don't want to sundown. Like I even if I don't play him again, I always kind of want to know he's out there. Like, I like where he is right now and what we've talked about and what he's doing. So I was just like, that makes sense. Like, he fell from grace, but he's got a plan.
I'll hold on to that for a second. Did you have? No.
No, I just it falls in line with I've never carried a character over across multiple campaigns, just because it's like you go through a certain period of time, you've done this thing, you're like, well, I want to do something else to keep it fresh, and sometimes it was necessary because you just the first character, Max, just basically passed into legend. Like, there's no way to play what it became.
Yeah.
It's just like it.
He was the first character we ever did that to, basically.
Yeah.
But so the thing I was thinking about was that sometimes, 'cause there's another question here that we probably won't go, but sometimes there's almost more, like, you get invested in a character so much that the thought of, like you said, like, basically telling the end of that character's story is like emotionally painful for you.
Yes.
And it feels better. And like, I kind of feel bad because I did that to Clive, I told that story, even though I was like, well, it makes perfect sense because in that world we wanted to advance time. But then it was very apparent that you're You're like, I don't like that. While I got to enjoy Fern as like,
Right,
oh,
you
he's just going to be in the woods forever.
Because he's a druid that lives forever.
And I was like, oh, and like eventually coming to terms with, okay, now I understand that part. Like in your head, there's just something that's okay with having a character running off and being in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And if my brain can like settle and can accept that it's running off and I'm at peace. But if like I see the death of that character, then that's like, I don't like that, unless it's really poignant and I can.
And honestly, I feel that we did that with Clive.
Yeah, we then went back and kind of came up with other stuff, which is like, no, his story's not over. And him and Fern are having an adventure.
Yeah, like he's probably gone, but there's more to it.
Yeah, especially now after we talked later, where we kind of,
look a special appearance later.
Well, it's like
he kind of did
200 years later. Yeah,
but he still like there was a little nod to that was like when in the D&D campaign when you guys went to Toril and you're going through Chult, you guys met like I think you spotted him, but like there was like an old guy at the camp with a bunch of rangers, and he was like, "Oh, no one's gonna mess with you guys here and stuff," and like the bushes and everything were moving. Like that was Fern. And the whole thing was he was looking for Clive because someone resurrected Clive and he was on the loose.
Oh, I didn't know Clive was resurrected.
Yeah, so there was like a whole thing. I was like, that's the story me and Owen want to just kind of let them have, is like the two of them, running off.
That, like, I don't step into the DM role very often, and that was probably like the best go we had of me doing that.
So it was a buddy cop adventure.
Yeah, it was. And
for a while.
It was sad to not think of Clive and Fern just run off through the forest being racist to somebody.
I want to preface that Clive was racist, but he learned from his friend Fern that certain stereotypes are not right.
And also like the definition, like it was like speciesist.
Yeah, he was specious. Yes, not really racist. Yes, but he grew and he learned throughout the story, and that particular game had a very poignant point, like a really good growth point. I think that Clive saw something happen to someone he never thought he would care about the way he did. Like he saw them as beginning in the campaign. He saw them as less than what he himself was. And he grew and he learned like, oh, maybe that was the wrong opinion. And then something happened where he thought he lost that person and he decided to burn it all down.
It's a really good point. I don't know if we have a question about that, but actually this kind of goes to answer another question that I didn't have an answer for. That when that happened, when basically Clive thought Fern was dead and they had taken away, and then you did that, like you played Clive doing something against his character type that was completely in character.
Mm-hmm.
So it was something that you couldn't think about doing unless you were thinking what he was going through, not who he was.
Right.
And that entire game, I had played Fern as like a set of rules. He's always going to listen to Clive. He's going to do that. And when you did that, not only was that like an emotional thing where I was like, oh my gosh, this is a really awesome moment, powerful moment. But then I was like, I'm nowhere near playing Fern to the level of that decision. Not the whole time, but it was just that decision. And I was like, that moment made me like, everybody needs to get better. Everybody needs to do that more. Because it was very, like I had never seen you made that kind of connection before and like switched the way, and you're like, no, I just realized that this character just flipped.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, dang. And I think what we played after was Keith. So I think probably a lot of that went into that the next games we played is like, oh man, no, we're now looking for, because the point I think I'm going around is that we've played so many games at this table. And like Max, you've been there from so many of the first ones, but the key couple that you weren't here for are the ones where like, especially the three of us started wanting role play deeper.
Yeah.
And like we all different opinions, maybe watching on TV, whatever but it wasn't an external thing. It was like, we saw it at the table and we were like, oh, like I'm sure there are people out there that get to that point quicker, that like have more fun, but all of a sudden we're like, that moment, what was that about? I want to have one of those. And I think all of us are kind of chasing those now in different ways. I feel bad because by the same token, with Max at the table, we had such a better group dynamic and all these other things. And I that's one of the frustrations when we were talking about like you not being at the table is I'm like, no. Cause now put you in that place and see that. And, but no, you're right. That moment.
It's the pinch of cayenne that you put into it.
It's just like, like, you put cinnamon in this, like that. Yeah. Yeah, because I remember I was just like, and we talked about how those were our two favorite characters and that game was really great and stuff like that. But I've always been like, I don't think I ever did anything in him in Fern that matches that level of development, because largely I was waiting for someone to point out something to me.
No one ever did.
And no one ever did.
See, so you say that, but I disagree. I think you stuck to your guns so well as Fern that's what justified Clive's growth. Because I think as time went by and no one pointed this stuff out, and I think even Clive was just like, I've done some awful things, but I can justify doing them myself, but I'm bringing Fern into these situations, and I don't think that's right.
I think the moment, if you turn that into a novel, the moment is when he killed the dwarf.
Yeah.
Because Clive, that moment of when, the dwarf died, and then he, Fern's like, I gotta go save my friend, and he basically reincarnates him as a human, and Clive is like, abomination. And,
some things just aren't.
And there was no doubt in Fern's mind that Clive, and then he stands up and he attacks Clive, so he proves the point.
Yeah.
And it was really like watching someone learn the wrong lesson. It was and I think you're right. That's a really point where Clive would have been like, oh, he bought the wrong lesson that I was pitching.
Yeah.
And maybe that was it's a very interesting character study.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, that's when gaming with you guys kind of really changed from just playing a game to, all right, this is role playing, actually going to put some, effort into these characters. It's not just, let's create a whatever for whatever,
because you were DMing all of those games. So and you were DMing 2 out of 3.
Yes.
Which is difficult.
Well, that's when I kept coming in playing as Veers.
Every once in a while.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. I feel bad because there are a couple cool characters that you had. The whole Emil, that whole thing.
Yeah. When you told me about how that was supposed to go down, I was like, man, that would have been great to see that happen in game.
Yeah. But those things happen. Hey, we're not dead yet. We're going to play other games. Yeah. Hopefully we're going to find ways to do this. Yeah, and I don't want to. Yeah, and I wasn't trying to harp. I just it's weird. We were putting into words things that were floating around in the back of my head. Is that was that time and that switch, and that I think now I understand some bitterness in me of no, but the players that I really want to be involved in the thing are anyway. So I'm sure this is thrilling podcasting.
This is awesome bitching about it.
Yeah, no. Okay. So let's see if we can wrap this up on I think we just answered about 3 of these that I hadn't even got to. Okay, yeah. So I guess one last one, and then we'll get on to the other thing. What advice would you give to new players about creating and involving a Vampire the Masquerade character?
If you're doing it for the first time, build something you're comfortable with. Don't try to go outside the box. Just build something that you think you can handle and your way around. If you try to get really complicated right off the bat, you're going to end up not liking what you've got, unless you are a very capable person when it comes to adjusting your play style.
I would say get a general idea of the type of person that you want your character to be. A little bit of background, a little bit of personality, and then just, like I do, dive in 200% and watch your character grow throughout the campaign. And just remember, your core character, that is what you started with. And that's, good or bad, that's what you got to stick with. Because if you keep wavering to go along with how the game's going, you'll never have an authentic character. You definitely want to, stick with what you started with and go from there. Make some decisions that your character would make, not you, and see where it goes.
One thing I've noticed that has kind of helped me is when I try to get into the mind of the character that I'm playing, if I see a decision come up and I'm uncomfortable with that decision, that usually means that's the right decision.
Yeah, for me, it's like for vampires specifically, there's no min-maxing.
No,
you can't. It can't be like D&D where you get really into tons of stats and rolls and what this weapon and that weapon does. Vampire, it's all taking place in your head, and for the most part, that's it. It can be a lot more fun and a lot more free to play. But with having said the whole don't min max, when you come up with your concept, don't be afraid of like going in on like there's certain flaws they're going to have or weaknesses, because those a lot of the time, and I mean a lot of the time, turn out to be the most fun part. Because it's
making
like,
the wrong decision can usually be the funnest thing.
It's just like, well, I guess they would do this in this situation, but it's really wrong and really dangerous. Like, yeah, that's when you need to do that, because that's when it's the most fun, when you don't have control over every little aspect of what you're doing. You leave it to your DM to decide your punishment.
There's a sense of freedom in being able to play your character.
Yeah.
Because you are doing whatever your character would do. The side note to that is don't use it as an excuse either. If there's a decision that you as a player don't want your character to make, but your character would make it, you gotta make it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the piece of advice that I would connect a lot of everything that you guys have all said, and something that kind of like I'm aware of now, and is something that I'm saying, is that I think playing a character, regardless of how you create it, because these are all really good tips, is a muscle, and you have to build it. You have to like keep using it, because you can have all the theoretical knowledge of how to do that, but like watching you guys do it, like, is where I start realizing that I'm like, oh, like I can see people learning things that maybe academically I know, but when I sit down to play a character, I'm like, ooh, that's a lot harder than I ever thought it would be. So, yep. We'll play characters. Have fun. Do it that way.
Do it.
Just do it. Okay. So to end this discussion, we are going to do probably the last one of these that we're going to do this season. So we're a little over, but we have an NPC that was created. Owen, you want to tell us about the...
Oh, okay. All right.
Speak of characters I have to learn how to play.
Yeah. I don't think you're going to have too hard a time on this one. This one will be like it subverts, but it's not crazy. Back in 1978, things were a little simpler. People had fewer TV channels, gas prices were a crisis, and I worked at an insurance company in Pittsburgh. Quiet place, nice enough people. Didn't ask too many questions. You showed up, did your work, smiled at the right times, and eventually you went home. At least that's what most people did. Me, I couldn't help but listen. Always have. You'd be amazed what people say when you think nobody's paying attention. Little things, like who's late on their mortgage, or who's taking extra long lunch breaks with the boss's secretary. The usual office stuff. I was good at staying out of people's way and smoothing over the rough patches. If tempers flared in the office, I'd crack a joke or pretend to spill my coffee, and everyone would stop arguing to make sure I didn't ruin their paperwork. My specialty was paperwork, actually. I didn't mind doing the stuff no one else wanted to touch. You're a real lifesaver, Eddie, they'd say. I never felt like a lifesaver, more like a guy handing out life jackets after the ship already hit the iceberg. Then Julian showed up. Julian. He never used his last name, was a businessman of sorts. He just appeared sometimes like he was out for a casual walk and happened to bump into me. First it was the diner where I'd get coffee after work, then at the bus stop, and even once at the grocery store. He had this way of sliding into conversations like he was an old friend, except he never actually said anything meaningful. Just a lot of, "Oh, Eddie, how's work?" Or, what do you think the new branch manager? It wasn't much at first, but it's amazing how much you can find out when you get people talking. And I talked a lot, but there was something else going on too. You ever have one of those moments where you start talking and halfway through you're not really sure why you're saying what you're saying? Yeah, well, that started happening a lot when Julian was around. He asked questions about the company, who was doing well, who was struggling, what the higher-ups were up to. Harmless stuff, I thought, except now I think back on it, I never really thought about what I was telling him until later. One night, Julian asked about offshore accounts. When you know it, I had an answer. Not that I'm an accountant or anything, but you pick up bits and pieces when you spend enough time in the office. Julian got this look on his face like he'd just caught the biggest fish in the pond. He said, "Eddie, you're a treasure trove, you know that?" And well, I didn't, but I nodded anyway. It seemed like the polite thing to do. After that, he started showing up more often, always at night. He'd never meet me at the office, always somewhere else. He kept asking these weirdly specific questions, and I kept answering like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't until later that I realized I'd been spilling the beans about everyone and everything, and I wasn't even sure why. But hey, when your biggest skill is quietly blending in, people don't question when you know a little too much. I'm not exactly the quickest on the uptake, but I started noticing things about Julian. Little things. Like how he never seemed to eat or drink anything when we'd meet. Or how he'd sometimes slip up and mention events that happened decades ago, like he was reminiscent about last week. And the way he'd just show up, always at the right time with that friendly, not quite a smile on his face. It was enough to make me suspicious, which for me is saying something. One night, Julie and I were in a quiet park by the river. He'd been talking in his usual vague way about seeing beyond the veil and the illusions of power, when suddenly everything went dark. Not dramatic dark, no thunderclap or menacing laughter, but more like I just blinked out of existence for a second. Then I woke up. When I woke up, things were different. Not in an obvious way, no fireworks or divine revelations, but something had shifted. It felt like I'd been handed a different rule book, one with a lot more pages and a lot fewer explanations. Julian wasn't there to fill me in. He just sort of stopped showing up. No farewell speech, no good luck, kid, just gone. At first I thought maybe he'd gotten bored or found another poor soul to pester, but it didn't take long to figure out why he ditched me. I'd tried to fit in, find a place among the other kindred, but they looked at me like I'd shown up to the wrong party without an invitation. They were all talking about their clans and bloodlines, and here I was, just plain old Eddie, with no secret handshakes or family ties. I was definitely out of my depth. So I did what I always did. I watched, I listened, and I waited. Turns out being a nobody has its advantages. People don't watch their words around you, and they don't see you coming. I made myself useful, picking up on the slack where others couldn't, and keeping tempers in check when things got heated. One by one, the kindred started seeing me as a neutral party, a harmless mediator who just wanted everyone to get along. One night at Elysium, a place where the fancy pants gathered to pretend they all liked each other, a couple of primogen were up each other's throats over some territorial issues. Nobody else seemed inclined to step in, so I figured, why not? I shuffled over and mumbled something about misunderstandings, and surely there's a way to compromise. I guess they figured if someone as unimportant as me can see the sense in backing off, maybe they should too. After that, it became a bit of a routine. People started coming to me with their problems. Not the big ones, mind you, just little grievances nobody else wanted to handle. A Toreador upset about someone stealing their spotlight. A Nosferatu trying to smooth over an insult. Little things. But little things add up. Before I knew it, people started calling me Harpy. It wasn't official or anything, just something people muttered when they thought I wasn't listening. That changed one night when the prince called me over. Prince Montclair. He's got this way of making every word sound like it was carefully polished before he let it out of his mouth. Smiled at me, which, to be honest, made me more nervous than when people are shouting. He said, "Edward, I believe you've already been performing the duties of a harpy with a certain finesse. I see no reason to make it official." I smiled, shrugged, and mumbled something about doing my best, and just like that, I was the Harpy of Jacksonville. Not exactly a title I was aiming for, but hey, I wasn't aiming for much to begin with. It's funny, though. Most of them still see me as this harmless, old-fashioned guy who stumbles his way into the right places at the right time. But that's the thing. I'm always exactly where I mean to be, and I know more about these people than they'd ever suspect. Just an unassuming little man in an outdated suit, watching the world play its games, pretending he's not paying attention. But I am. When the time comes, well, sometimes the best way to change the game is to play dumb until everyone else forgets you're playing it at all.
Beautiful. Wow. So you guys think?
I mean, it's kind of obvious who he is. I said it a couple times.
Yeah. Did I miss something?
He's the harpy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought you were okay. Yeah. Duh.
Yeah.
No, I knew he was a harpy. I thought you were like bitching that he was based off somebody.
No.
I made a leap there.
He's-
Yeah.
he's-
Don't worry
he's-
about it.
He's nobody that exists.
Yeah. No. How do I want to put this? That character informed a big chunk of the history of the city now. And
Oh, sweet.
because I had something that was slowly developing, and like because he's like a final piece in the puzzle, that kind of had to have happened now. So
Mhm.
cool. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Beautifully written.
Yeah, I think it's a great alternative take to that. Instead of being a person who's all about ego, you made a person who's all about like efficiency.
Yep.
It's not the flashy Toreador
Flamboyant.
Yeah.
No.
that they always seem to be, but
Yeah. Like, and it's really interesting that like in a city in a region that is ruled by Primogen, the Harpy is a person who has no clan affiliation.
Yep.
That's
He's caitiff.
fascinating. And of course, we the people who played recently found out that the sheriff
So-
is the same thing. So-
Yeah, I don't. When you were talking about the sheriff and you brought that up, I was like, "Crap, he stole my idea." But I was like,
Yeah.
"I'm still gonna."
But
do
it is kind of cool, and knowing some things about the prince, like I said, one thing turns into another, and you're like, I can understand how they got to this situation.
Yeah.
This is really interesting, and in a city ruled by Primogen, that might be a pretty big power play is to start eliminating people who have ties.
Yep.
So yeah, everything works. That's a beautiful character.
Yeah. Very
Super
well written.
interesting. Very nice job.
Thank you.
Well, cool. I'm gonna have to go think about that, digest some stuff, and I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing us ramble on for an hour and a half. So yeah, any last things you guys got to say?
No.
All right.
I want to play.
Well played.
Well, you know when we play.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
See ya.